Hello, hello, thank you for stopping by. This is Still Life for the Xbox, developed by Microids Canada and released in 2005. This is a sequel to the game Mortem, which is a game I actually have in my Steam account for some reason. And there was also a sequel to this game called Still Life 2, that was released in 2009. This one, of course, was between the two, and it apparently sold 240,000 copies worldwide. It was also released for Windows, and I think this is one you can pretty easily get in the big PC game stores online. This is a crime drama, basically. It has pre-rendered backgrounds, and it sort of looks a little like Resident Evil in the way you kind of look when you're walking around. There are a total of 7 chapters in the game, and you will play between 2 different characters. Victoria, who is in a modern setting, and then you play her grandfather, who actually was a private eye many years before. In both cases, you're a character that's trying to solve a series of murders. Basically, there's a serial killer out there, and it's somehow tied to art. Thus the title, Still Life. But seriously, by the time I passed the halfway point of this game, I thought there was remarkably little reference to art. I'm surprised the connection just isn't stronger. It almost feels like an afterthought here. Overall, the hours spent in this game feel a little empty to me. By the time I hit Chapter 5, I felt like there hadn't been much actual progression in the story, and that's close to 70% of the way through the game. Now, I know this is kind of in between 2 other games, so maybe those games help flush it out, I don't know, but this was the first of the series that I'm playing, and it just kind of feels a bit empty. I also think it's important to point out some of the cliché story elements that I ran into. At one point, you've got the chief that's mad at you for no possible reason, and he puts you on suspension. Actually, this part of the game was kind of a mess. He puts you on suspension because you're too close to the case. Wow. That not only is untrue in this story, but it's such a cliché by modern standards. Also, you swear at your boss in this game, which, that's probably grounds for getting fired, but whatever. And also, he has you go get him coffee. Like, it's an order, go get me coffee. That's actually a fireable offense, I think. I mean, really? You're an FBI agent, and your boss is using you like a secretary? Is he going to have you cleaning the floors next? Once again, cliché character writing, cliché story elements. We probably wouldn't have batted an eye at this one in the 80s, but it is still ridiculous. Also, one more thing. For someone that gets put on suspension early in the game, you certainly haven't had any of your privileges removed. You can access the office the exact same way as from when you weren't on suspension, so it really has little effect here. At first, I thought this sort of felt a little bit like those CSI crime games. I'll put a link to a different review in the description of this video. It felt a little bit like this because, at first, you're not only trying to solve a crime, but you get to run forensics. And that's kind of fun to do. But, honestly, it only felt like CSI for the first chapter of this game as opposed to the later ones. That's kind of an aspect that started out really great, and then it just faded over time. It was kind of bizarre. I thought it was going to be a major focus, and it just wasn't. The game looks like it would be like a Silent Hill or a Resident Evil clone, but it does feel more like a point-and-click adventure, and it just happens to be in 3D and have that appearance. The game handles just fine, and I do like the story in this one enough, but I am feeling like it doesn't have much replay value. Once you know what to do and you know how to get through it, it's not like you're going to run around and try it again. You don't have a gun, you're not going around shooting things. There's no real danger in that way. You're not going to want to play it again to try to get better. I'm on the last puzzle or 2 of this entire game, and there just aren't any guns. That's also kind of weird considering you are an FBI agent with no guns. So we'll start with the modern setting. When you play Victoria, 2 things stand out for her character. First, when she runs, I feel like the animation's off just a little bit. She seems to run a tiny bit too slow across the environment. Or at least that's what I feel like when she runs. Next, she is an FBI agent trying to solve a series of murders, and she doesn't dress like an FBI agent. She looks like she belongs fighting to free the Matrix, or maybe she wants to go clubbing. I don't know. In any case, her attire is not functional for her profession at all. And she doesn't carry a gun. Very odd to me. Some other things that sort of stand out as strange. Speaking in games like this, they usually offer dialogue selections. Like, you'll have a couple of different sentences to choose to progress the story. Here, you say different things, but you don't get that sort of a tree to select. You just get these icons that appear on screen, and it says, oh, you can press the L or the R button to speak sometimes. Occasionally you can press the A button, but the thing is, I have no idea what you're going to say when you press one of those buttons. So you just eventually press all the buttons, I guess. It's like a lost mechanic that they didn't complete. Very strange. Also, in a few places, you trigger animations by accident, and you will waste a little bit of time. Like, you're in your house, and accidentally you go back to your car. Just because you don't know what's in a corridor, you click on it once, and now the animation is outside, and you have to wait to come back in.
Yes.
Or maybe you're walking around a table because you clicked to do an interaction and talk to somebody, and you can't cancel out of the action. It just wastes a little bit of time. It doesn't happen in every scene, but it does happen, and it was enough for me to mention it. So these are the things that stand out for me, and most of these appear near the start of the game. But past these things, and I do think they're relatively minor, I think there are a lot of fun things that I do like about this one. First, I think the environments in this game look great. This is top-notch for the Xbox PS2 generation. The settings, they just have a really appealing style to them, and I really feel like they help the story along. They just look really good. Somebody did a great job on the backgrounds. Now, the story certainly isn't for kids, but it's interesting enough. You are chasing some killer. He wears a top hat and some porcelain mask. Yeah, it kind of looks like the Phantom of the Opera, I suppose. The connection is definitely there. So maybe this isn't a unique design, but I am interested enough to see where it goes. It is weird, though, that I'm on the last chapter of the game, and I feel like I haven't really learned much of anything in terms of piecing together who the criminal is. There are a variety of video scenes in this game, these cutscenes that happen from time to time, and they have the basic type of character models you'd expect from the era. Maybe they're limited on detail or a little misproportioned. It's better than a lot of games from that era, I think, but it's not as good as what we see in games on more modern consoles. Definitely not. You do get to go through puzzles from time to time, and like many games of this style and era, the puzzles are going to be okay, but some of them are just going to feel forced. At one point you're trying to break into an apartment and you need to pick a lock. Thus you're given a lock-picking puzzle. Okay, this part makes sense. But I know a little bit about lock-picking. It was kind of one of the hobbies I picked up during the pandemic lockdown. Now, I'm no expert by any means, but they have a 9-pin door lock on a 100-year-old door, and the mechanism and the shape of the picks just make no sense. It's like someone just built a puzzle and tried to pretend it was a lock. The game has a lot of loading screens. This is going to happen. They're definitely frequent. But what's great is the loading times are actually only a few seconds long, usually, so it never feels like a problem. Games in this era usually had loading times, and some were very terrible. This one actually has really small ones. It manages these loads very well. So jumping back and forth between a bunch of areas, it doesn't become upsetting. And honestly, I wish more games of this era were this efficient with their loading screens. Like I said, you get plenty of cutscene videos, and those videos, they never seem too long. I know some games, those cutscenes go forever and ever. No, these are relatively concise, and most are pretty stylish. The thing is, this is pretty much the only place you're really going to run into any action in this game. This isn't an action game. It's a point-and-click adventure, where you're trying to just figure out who the villain is. According to the long plays online that I gave some brief looks at, this one should be able to be finished in 5 or 5.5 hours if you know what you're doing. For me, playing for the first time, it's taken me like 12 hours so far. Like I said, I'm on the very last chapter right now. I am enjoying this one, as it is, although I do feel like the story's kinda weak. I mean, I don't know, collecting clues in this one, I feel like you're not really collecting a ton and you're not really pointing towards any criminal. It just takes a long time to not feel like I'm getting too much information. You start the game on the 5th victim of this crime spree, and it just makes the game feel a little less immediate somehow, I think. Still, I love the rendered backgrounds, and I like it enough to get to the end. I actually might go back and play the first game in the series after this one. This wasn't an expensive game either. I've only picked it up for a couple of dollars. I think as a result of that, it kind of exceeded my expectations pretty early on. I've paid more money for much worse games. This one was only $6 or $7, and it's something that actually makes me curious enough about the other games in the series. I'm going to have to give some of them a try for sure. Well, that's all I have today for Still Life for the Xbox. If you like this sort of thing, please feel free to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Thanks for spending a little time watching the video, and I hope to catch you on another one.